On this anniversary, the name, the fate, and the pain of Hiroshima is sharper than ever. Today it is testing the allegiance of nations like Japan, and it is the specter for the world in general whenever a new weapon succeeds or a new conference fails. In Hiroshima, the Cold War is a grim reality.
Lying between the mountains and the sea, it made the ideal place to live and the ideal target. Looking down is to look back. The town, but not the memory, is rebuilt. The new Hiroshima looks normal enough, a place of wide streets and white concrete. But for a Japanese town, there is hardly any movement, hardly any noise. The soul was ripped out of this place, burned into the ground like the shadow of a man on the steps of the Sumitomo Bank. The memory deliberately preserved like the dome of the old exhibition hall. The bomb exploded right above it, leaving it alone to stand as witness to a city that had existed. The old atomic dome adds a realistic touch to the Hiroshima Peace Park and to the collection of monuments and museums here which record man's terrible entry into the atomic age. Inside, the familiar emblem of the atoms for peace, the message of the museum and of the grim exhibits that follow. "15 years later, they still come, curious and accusing. These scientists who unlocked the atom, Einstein, Hahn, Oppenheimer, are they here as great men or as a kind of rogues gallery? One is not too sure. And their product, that mushroom of dark red and yellow, feeding on an estimated 250,000 lives. 250,000 lives, and it was such a small bomb. Was it necessary? Will it ever happen again? These are questions that still dominate the Japanese today, that explain the recent troubles and the growing neutralism. It's impossible to come here and not feel emotionally involved. These pictures, these endless shapes vaguely human, these piles of bones and bodies, remind one automatically of Belsen, Dachau, and Buchenwald. The Japanese look on them much the same way, as a crime against humanity. They are not bitter, they do not attempt to judge or blame, feeling only that it must never happen again. Here in the museum, some of the so-called Hiroshima maidens, the youngest survivors, explain what the bomb meant and still means to Japan.
Emiko Takimoto is 26 and her job is a teacher of dressmaking. Emiko, is it difficult for a girl from Hiroshima to get married?
非常に難しいんですけど、今まででたくさんの幸福な家庭を作っていらっしゃる方もありますけれども、いざそういう時になりますと、結婚の話が持ち込むと大変難しく、なかなか縁がつがらない。
Emiko says that it is difficult for a girl from Hiroshima to get married, that the Japanese men have a reluctance, perhaps a natural one, to marry girls from this city. They fear genetic effects. But she says some of her friends have married, they have had children, and so far no untoward results. Tagako Harada is 27 and a government clerk. Tagako, do you ever remember that day still? Do you worry that it could happen again?
ございません。広島市の市民、その他みんな平和を願う私たちには、次の世界で何が起ころうということを時たま考えることがありますけど、その恐怖を乗り越えて、
Tagako says that not for one single day of her life has she forgotten the horror of August 6, 1945. She says most of the people of Hiroshima are scared it may happen again, although she personally doesn't believe it will. Emiko, another question. Do you feel it's a good idea for the city of Hiroshima to dwell so much on that tragedy?
その当時のことを忘れようとしても、さっきの話のように別に毎日思ってるわけですけど、自分としては少しでも忘れる時を持ちたいと思いますけど、それはなかなか無理なわけですけど、私としては学校で勤務している間はその当時のことを忘れないでおります。
Emiko says she would like to forget, but she has the scars on her face to help her remember. As for the Peace Museum and the other exhibits here, she says they are good as a reminder for other countries.
Atoms for Peace. This last exhibit always draws a large, reflective crowd. As we stood here, Mao Zedong was declaring that China was not afraid of a world nuclear war, that she could afford to lose 200 million or more people and still emerge as the only survivor. Atoms for peace, they seem to ask, or a world of Hiroshimas. Out again into the park, here a hopeful monument for the coming generations, and the burial mound where the old ones lie. And the only cenotaph of its kind, the first to an atomic war. Will it also be the last? In Hiroshima, it is a custom to bow in hope.
Years ago, that was 11 years after the bomb, there were still so many casualties, the Red Cross built this special emergency hospital. The name here in Japanese, the Atomic Hospital.
Early morning, the lineup of outpatients begins. 70 a day, every day. New ones come all the time. 15 years later, the rate of anemia and leukemia is growing among those exposed to the bomb. The questions of the doctors are the same now. What happened to you when the bomb fell? Where were you standing? On every desk there is a map computing the degree of radiation and distance. These ailing survivors were far from the hypercenter of the explosion. All those in a 2.5-mile radius were killed instantly by the blast or died soon after from the terrific heat burns. Those on the fringe who did survive are kept alive by daily injections. This man, a German Jesuit priest, told me there is no cure for the radiation sickness from which he suffers. There is worse. This woman is blind, has leukemia, and severe radiation burns that will not heal. Her case is not unusual. To survive here is each man's individual struggle, and there is an echo of it in these grim wards, in the bells and the paper art that hang in every room. The bells mean good luck, and the little paper birds, get well. Each relative brings one more on each visit, and you can count the years they have been here. And the years, says Dr. Shigeto, the director of this hospital, have not put an end to the pain.
Dr. Shigeto, are people still dying from the effects of this bomb 15 years later?
Yes, in the hospital, every year about 40 or 50 patients die.
40 or 50 people die every year?
Yes.
One hospital for treatment and another for research. This collection of huts overlooking Hiroshima is called the ABCC, the Atomic Bomb Casualty Commission. Its purpose, coldly realistic. What to expect, what to do in the future.
Hiroshima is always the grim reminder not only of what did happen, but of what might happen again. 15 years later, a staff of 600 scientists here at the Atomic Bomb Casualty Commission are intensifying their studies into radiation to help the past, and if it should ever come to it, the future survivors.
This project is a division of the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission, attempting to replace fear by fact, the known for the unknown. But the facts are hardly pleasant. 250,000 Japanese survived the two bombs, the same number said to have died. and half of these now form a permanent study group for the laboratories here. Regular blood counts are taken and compared to a similar number who were not exposed. So far, the microscopes have shown a heavy increase in blood cancer, 12 times the normal rate, and also in blindness, 5 times the norm. They detail the health and habits of 250,000 people, but it all adds up to one very brief conclusion. The life expectancy of those exposed is very much shorter.
An American and a Japanese scientist jointly administer this project, Dr. Darling and Dr. Maki. I believe your two major studies here are in the fields of genetics and that of lifespan. Is there any evidence that the people who were exposed to the bomb, to the radiation, have a shorter lifespan?
Such a kind of study, it will take a long time, so that we have not yet the exact figure about the result of this study. We should wait a little while.
I believe you've also made a study of animals in this regard. Have you found any shorter lifespan there?
Oh, just we understanding was that in literature there is some shortening of lifespan in animal studies. But how will be the human body, we don't know yet.
Dr. Darling, what about this question of genetics? What have been the results of your studies, if there are any apparent yet?
Well, a long study of 6 years was made by ABCC, at which time the children who were born to parents who were exposed but were conceived after the bombing were compared with an equal number of children from parents who had not been exposed. And this included about 80,000 children over the 6-year period. And in the comparison of these two groups, we could find no significant differences between the number of any indices that you might want to mention, infant mortality, malformations, so on in the group.
Yet do you feel there's still a popular belief that there are genetic upsets from people exposed to radiation?
Well, I'm sure that this has been greatly overplayed in world concern. It's a natural anxiety, and I think that unfortunately there has been a great deal of emphasis placed on the possibility and a good deal of misleading information probably on it.
Well, these fears probably were strongest when ABCC first set up here nearly 15 years ago. The longer you continue in study, do you get more optimistic, or are you still a little cautious?
Well, from the scientific point of view, we wouldn't be here if we knew the answers.
Dr. Darling also stressed to me that the studies here bear little relation to modern warfare, the first A-bomb being a simple affair compared to what man can unleash today. But though a future nuclear war might destroy much of the human species, Dr. Darling does not believe that it could radically change it. He says mutation, the reproduction of very different beings that we might look on as monsters, is not at all likely. He says the genes, the structures, the cell structures which determine the human shape are hard enough to change by design, let alone by accident. And yet the fear of it remains here in Hiroshima.
Among the young, on the university campus, the fear is greatest. It all looks natural enough, but no one knows the mental effects of the bomb on the new and on the coming generations. Are they normal? No one can tell them for sure, and doubt forms its own disease. Many experts say these children of Hiroshima are backward by comparison. Here on the campus, a social psychologist, Dr. Saki, told me he believes that mental deficiencies are just beginning to show.
Some scholars believe that there are clear effects upon the intelligence, and another say that there are no such effect. This is why the younger generations are so neurotic. If the results are very clear, the
They would have more confidence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But some scientists say that there have been signs of mental defects, and others disagree. Is that it?
Yes, yes. There are some discrepancy between the opinions.
Yes. What about moral values, Dr. Sakai? Has there been any change there, any lowering of moral standards at all?
Yes, the moral standard change is, on one hand, caused by the general trend of this country, and on the other, the special cause of this city, I think.
The cause of this city. There is a madness about Hiroshima at night, unexplained by what the Japanese usually call the gay quarter. There is too much vice for a small city. A neon-lit jungle of bars, street after street of open, blatant bordellos. How many homeless children grew up here by whatever means they could? That, of course, is not peculiar to Hiroshima, but the social workers here flatly link the moral degeneration to the bomb. Or perhaps it is simply a way of forgetting the sorrow and memories that grow in the night. Wandering here by the river, behind the bars and the jazz saloons, we found a very different wake. A funeral barge, we were told, for the latest victim of the atomic bomb. The Japanese begin to crowd the shore to watch. This ceremony is enacted every time an A-bomb victim dies. And remember, there is one almost every week. It is Buddhist in tradition, the start of a voyage that will never end. And the lanterns are there to light the way. The river has a special significance in Hiroshima. So many people plunged into it and drowned, escaping the heat of the fireball. For what do they pray? As a nation, Hiroshima in its blood, Japan prays hard for neutralism. Perhaps that feeling is better depicted here than in the riots in Tokyo. Perhaps also the desire and the danger is exaggerated. Indeed, there is a tendency to attribute everyone who dies in Hiroshima to the bomb. But even so, the feeling is deep, fervent, genuine, and understandable. The lanterns float away on the long journey to peace, each containing the name and, traditionally, the soul of the victim. By dint of numbers and of effort, one will find the way. The philosophy the Japanese feel should be the same in politics. Whatever the hour or the place, life revolves round the bomb. The Hiroshima rest house is typical. Squatting on the hard tatami, the straw mats, the old who survived come each day to the rest house for care and advice. It's a voluntary project, financed by an American novelist and managed by a Japanese writer, Koichiro Tanabe. Mostly he talks to them about the principles of Buddhism. But moral courage is hard when you are old. And besides, most of them, after 15 years, are beginning to show severe signs of anemia and even senility. After a time, their minds begin to wander. They begin to question Mr. Tanabe. Has the bomb been banned? Isn't the world going to make some declaration? Theirs is the vague expression of the rioting young students, not knowing who to believe, which flag to follow. In Hiroshima, every small street has a part in the drama, playing to the tourists or to the politicians, or both. Hundreds of stores, countless booklets, a world of mushroom clouds and personal tragedy. All designed to catch the eye or serve a cause. And there are many causes, humanitarian and scientific, as we have seen, and political. Here, the leader of the left-wing movement of the 6th of August. Mr. Hamamoto, does your organization plan any protest meetings this August against nuclear weapons? He tells me there will be many demonstrations this time. He says not only Hiroshima, but all Japan is afraid and uneasy about present world politics. They will continue to demonstrate, he says, until the big powers or the United Nations agree on disarmament. Politics and the peace parades, away from the suffering of the hospitals and laboratories, a class of young Japanese sit innocently sketching the horrors of 15 years ago. To them, it is remote, almost meaningless. It might never have happened. To them, the park is just a park. The shouting and the politics is mainly for them. The hope that the old Hiroshima may never be more than a painting, like a lesson learned. And indeed, who doesn't hope that? Whatever the generation, we are all the children of Hiroshima. The politics and the prayers are all mixed up, obscuring the words, the epitaph that is written here. May the error never be repeated.
15 years after, Hiroshima is still feeling the pain of the war that the atomic bomb ended and of the one that it began, the Cold War. Michael McClare reporting. Now back to News Magazine.